Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I would like to speak about an idea that first I titled it Work Can't Continue Without Joy, and then I thought perhaps it's a more elegant title to say Work Can't Evolve Without Joy, because work can continue joylessly. There's many things in life about doing work and exerting energy that will not meet the inner realms. I could say 80%, maybe, I mean that's too far. I could say 60%, even if you're a very calm and gentle and passive person, 60% of the day there has to be effort expressed in work that has nothing to do with the emotional state of the being. That means that's a huge factor, that if the person can separate their activity from their emotions, they may suddenly find an ability to endlessly do the activity. You see, energy is conditional to the story. Now, when we think about work, everything that is considered to work, there is an exchange of energy. For me, when I give these talks or when I do anything, I notice the energy changing, but I also notice that the importance of the activity creates energy. So think of it this way, that in an emergency, suddenly your attention becomes hyper and the person accesses an intelligence they didn't know they have when things get serious. But when things are casual, you know, then the person doesn't really, um, could be ignorant of that hyperattention. In my early writings, I had written a concept called the Great Work. And little did I know that this idea in alchemy had a meaning, but I did not use it in a alchemical sense. I, at the time when I wrote a book with that title, The Great Work. And really the inspiration, how that idea opened up to me, was that human beings, if they consider to be multidimensional, their work will be greater than one dimension. And that every person on this planet, their great work is not just for the outer realms. Most people work for the outer realms. Very few people work for the inner realms. Most people identify with their inner realms. They don't use it. They don't work with it. The idea of the great work was the greatest thing the human being is working for in their lifetime. I thought of human beings, that a lot of human life, of course, yes, we are a young species, we are still creatures that require to play, require to appreciate the joys of individual living. But when I looked at civilization, I was like, a lot of human life from a collective standpoint is actually being wasted. And I don't mean that individual life doesn't have a value. I don't mean that if you're like some Zen, let's say, some yogi living in the mountains, that your life is meaningless just because you're not around a collective or considering a sort of collective. Even though the yogis behind their eyes, they can't be separate. But I'm saying that, you see, there is dimensions to life, you know. Just like how we consider 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time and even more potential dimensions, similarly, as man is comprehending the landscape, he's adding to his own value of perception. And I could say that human beings, I mean, sure, yesterday I think I spoke about in the sense of a personal purpose and an impersonal purpose, and how every human being, they require to serve 2 dimensions that are being. 1 dimension is their own being, the other dimension is what they are being in. It's more exciting. Usually most people can attend to their inner realms. Most people, their emotions drive them. And not that that's wrong. That's the emotional intelligence is there for a reason. But what I'm trying to say is that a lot of inner lives are just hidden, and the being is born. The human being is born. The human being lives in certain phases of civilization. If it's in sync, it will feel open. It will feel like it has found a reality rhythm, a rhythm of realness for itself, you know. But and it may contribute to the collective in that way, but really the great work of the human being, think of it this way, that every person, imagine 8 billion, we're getting close to 8 billion on this planet, 8 billion human beings. Imagine every human being, whatever life they have lived, they gave a portfolio. They gave a portfolio to their civilization. Do you know? That means we entered as an honorable human being and we leave as an honorable human being, you know? Even though the baby doesn't have a concept of honor. But what I mean is that we don't, you see, everybody leaves this world empty-handed. Alexander the Great knew this. That's why he was, you know, burned on a boat, as was tradition back in the day, with his arms open. So if there is an empty-handedness, we are like energy. We are like a storehouse of energy for the lifetime. I would consider, sure, you could see us as human beings, and we have this sort of ethnocentric view of reality. Or you can see it as, instead of us, how would I say it? I'm just saying your mind is living a life, but most minds live quiet lives and they fade. And now more than ever, especially before the year 2050, there requires to be an advancement in communication. And that advancement in communication is not just the person is in a new environment to communicate something different, but that the person's inner realm gives a different authorization to the moment. You see, if there's something as such as they call it conscience, or you can say it's the nature of the person. You know, it's as if for example, all the human beings who saw that George Floyd video, their human part cried. You know. Their human dimension broke. You know, we're a civilization right now that, because there's a sort of competitive system, not that that's bad, that's part of the evolution, but I'm saying evolution of society, but in this competitive system, people are trying to use the blind spots of others as an advantage. And I can say an advanced civilization would be a civilization that if you had a blind spot, you'd know that there is around 8 billion people, or maybe more, that that can also be conscious of your blind spot. You see, it's an emergence of a collective mind. This happens not just here, it happens in many places. many parts of nature you look, it's either smaller cells become tissue, they become more complex cells, and guess what? Human beings, you think we're not cells in this massive cosmos? We are. We're like ants on our own hill. And so these ants have a design oriented agenda of nature. That means you can say, is survival a conspiracy? No, it's just something you have to do. It is the nature. And so if the person, let's say, is good-willed, they see something like the George Floyd video or whatever, and the chaos of it, there's something in the human system, as if their inner realms can't just stand. Like all those people who went on in the streets rioting, I understand. It was like, you see, I'll tell you something that I know happens in Iran. Now Iran, of course, is a very complex country. It's a country ideologically suffocated in a strange way, but there is, of course, an intellectual community in all nations there are. But the thing is, that I remember in 2016, I hadn't seen my cousins on my father's side for a while, and so I remember I had come exactly from 2000. In 2016 I was in Rishikesh, for a couple months there, and because it was close to Iran, so I went to Iran. Long story short, a cousin of mine, who a distant cousin, not even the close cousins, came to engage that much. Imagine not seeing your cousins for like 10 years, and then it's as if you're sitting with statues at at a party where everybody's but there were certain distant cousins, and one of these distant cousins took me to his cottage. And on the way, let me tell you, long story short, this cousin was endlessly showing off, but it's fine, family is family. You gotta let family live, and so what happened is, there was this strange, in the Shia Islamic tradition, which you find in countries, for example, Iran, there is a specific religious day and a religious event where people go into the mosque at night, at a specific, prayer hour in the evening, and they have this, they call it Du'a Komel, prayer of Komel, something like that. And the point of it is, they put the holy book on their head, of course, in a unique ceremonial fashion, but at the same time, grown men, like a bunch, you can say like 50 grown men in a mosque, start crying, but they're not crying for themselves, they're crying for a religious figure who had fallen in history. They were crying for the suffering of a religious person or something of this sort. Tears of sorrow for what enlightened human beings went through back in the day. From the Islamic Shia standpoint. I don't know many people know this or not, but Islam has denominations similar to Christianity. So there is Shia and Sunni, and there's different agreements and disagreements between, all ideological systems will seek their own sovereignty in order to exist, but some are grouped together, some are not. Anyways, so I found myself specifically on this night, my cousin taking me to this mosque, and it was weird because we were driving like 2 hours outside of Iran to go drink, but my cousin came to show off the mosque, and he showed off like the kitchen of the mosque. I'm like, yo, is this guy really showing me the kitchen of the mosque? It's like, and I was like, okay, it's like, let's go with the flow of the moment. It was a very Taoistic moment. But I found myself in this situation where it was evening, and it was that specific chant I was explaining to you, Dai Komel or whatnot, was beginning to occur. And it was a situation where I was in the mosque, I was sitting there, and I could understand, of course I understand Farsi, but the person was saying certain things in Arabic. But at the same time, I'm there listening, and I suddenly see everybody start crying. Even my cousin, but it wasn't real crying. It was group sadness. You know, like there's the mob mentality, the group mob mentality you see in history often or in films. Similarly, this was a group sorrow mentality. Do you know? So I was there, but there was an artificial component. It was as if it was a cultural performance. That means there was this mullah walking in the mosque, and when the mullah walked past this guy, this grown man, he was attending to his kid. The moment this religious person passed by him, he started acting like he's crying. Oscar level performance, fake tears. The moment the guy passed away, his tears stopped. And so when we were there was a situation where they turn off the lights. I mean, there's some light on in the mosque, but it's like this dark, really, kind of religious atmosphere. And in the mosque, in that darkness, of course, in the Shia denomination of Islam, um, while I was in that mosque, they turn off the lights. There's one guy with a microphone chanting certain prayers from the Quran or whatnot. He's saying certain things, and at the same time, everybody starts crying, and you start hearing in that darkness like grown men shouting, and some of them seem authentic, some of them incredibly artificial. It's like, I'm like, what is this? Am I in Shakespeare play? Like, but the thing was, I was there, and everybody was crying. But then something strange happened. It was as if it was a fake reason to cry, but then people were really crying. And I was like, this simple, perhaps to the secular mind meaningless religious event became a reason for all those grown men, with families, with wife and children, all these grown men in that situation having a reason to release their emotions. So you could totally see, maybe the guy was crying at first for the prophet's death, or a certain figure's death, religious figure's death. But then suddenly you see it's as if he's not just crying for that. He's crying for the misfortune of the existential condition on a deep down subconscious level. That means subconsciously, or even you can say, nobody I could say nobody, intelligence can't be measured. It is just what you see. I don't know how to tell you this. Henry David Thoreau says it better than me. It's not what you're looking at that matters. It's what you see. I was looking at an artificial group sadness, only to realize that people in this world, you can't be dishonest, and you can't be, let me tell you what it is. There is a sort of shift in states where the person is individual and states where the person isn't individual. And I'm not, guys, when I was there, I started crying. But I wasn't crying for the religious reason. I was crying that there were people there who were artificially crying. As if they had not understood the significance of the religious event. The religious event was like some sacrifice of a prophet, some prophetic figure. I don't want to say a prophet, because there's Prophet Muhammad, and then the whole Shia and Sunni denomination is based on who came after. That means Shias were the people who went and followed relatives of the Prophet, people who were of the family of the Prophet. For example, in the Shia tradition, they call it Imam Ali, if I remember correctly. And in the Sunni tradition, for example, they feel no, after the Prophet passed away, the authority went to another lineage of movement. But at the same time, both traditions respect, for example, the Quran and similar views on God and whatnot. So anyways, that was a very unique moment of psychology, you know? The cool thing is, any moment, whether the person achieves the inner realm desire or not, you can always watch. That means something I notice, whether it's joy, suffering, or whatever, you can watch it. And sure, like you can identify it as well. There was a point when I was in the UK. This is before, way before these talks, 2011. I was in the UK at that time, but not in Birmingham, somewhere else. And I got so sick, like physically, that like pretty much I had one night where I drank and I got really uh, ashamed of my own existence. Just reminiscent though. I was reminiscing. But anyways, I had a bad night and I became so sick that I had to go to the hospital for a couple days. You know? Trust me, it has consequences when the human being looks down on themselves, because you don't realize you are also a natural being. You know, that means when how the human being treats itself is, you can say, how the planet is treating itself. The psychology of man can get obsessed with the social program, the cultural program, the biological program. There's various applications, various ways that the existence can happen. The advantage of the mind, that it gives probabilities, that the mind is the only access to the multidimensional that man instantly has. That means, you know, if a person was looking for a stargate or a portal in this world, I'll tell you there's two on your face. This idea of the great work was that the human being, they noticed that if they live for themselves, it is true, it is easier. But you only enjoy the fruits of the seeds you plant. But if the person realizes there's a value, that it's not the point of life, because the yogic, there is in any idea taken out of context can entrap, of course. Can literally become a different idea, you know? That means you can say the concept could be same, but if the context changes, it will have its toll on the concept. That means even, I stand here speaking about philosophers, for example, Diogenes, Socrates, Aristotle, and whatnot, but I was not alive then. That means there's the challenge of the mind trying to attempt to animate the archaic unknown. There's a quote Rabindranath Tagore says, which is, Rabindranath Tagore was an Indian polymath who Einstein even went to see this guy. Einstein was like, all right, I gotta meet Tagore, you know. And so Rabindranath Tagore has this quote, remarkable quote, where he says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and I saw that life was service. So the dude thought life was joy, yay, fun. He ran after fun, and then he realized, wait a minute, it's not just fun. There's suffering here. There's things you got to prepare and embrace the tactician's helmet for. So the So you awaken and you see the crucial element of the human life, which is service. Now, most people work to service themselves, you know? So that's why when they go to work, they don't really care. I mean, it depends on the job you have. If you're the company owner, then you care. But if you're just a low-level employee who just wants to go home as soon as possible, then it's as if you don't even care for your work. So you're pretty much, anybody who doesn't care for their work, it's kind of like you're doing nothing, pretty much. It's like talking to someone. If you don't care for them, you don't really listen. Have you noticed that? That means you can instantly know who cares for you and who doesn't, because it depends on if they see you or not. Do you know? The third part of the quote after Tagore, so the whole quote is, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. This is very true, that the superior joy is actually a sort of superior service, is a collective service. That means I was in, like, kind of like in my room as just a regular human being like, okay, what am I going to do tomorrow? And then suddenly, for a second, I thought, wait a minute, how many days on this planet have I been the center of my attention? I noticed, like, it's like, I was like, how have I been obsessed with the self this whole time, And that was a very eye-opening moment when I realized there's more than my eyes. And I think that's one of the healthiest things that can happen. That you realize you're just an angle out of 8 billion different other angles out there. Yet the center of the circle is the same. There's a feeling that has visited me a couple times in this life. It is the feeling that there is something that is important but is not being seen. It's the feeling of feeling the music of the party from a wall, from the other side of the wall. It's that feeling. And I think that feeling is when the person has found a stillness and silence where they can accept their simple self. Because if you can't accept your simple self, your sense of perfection is going to be complex, so you judge yourself 24/7. Nothing made me really be like, I'll tell you, I saw videos of myself as a child, Like my parents showed a version of me like this super young kid, like, 11 months old or something, you know, and I was like running and like, and I saw myself and I'm like, look at this silly kid, and then I realized it is me. I am that kid. And so I realized that the inner child is your earlier memories and how you are identifying with it. This call of work is the significance of the lifetime. When Rabindranath says service is joy, that recognition of the transformation of the value of joy to just being instant, because the inner realms are very instant. That's why I use the term evocational. What does that mean? That means, I don't know why this is. Maybe because the child is attended to. That means the child doesn't work for all the stuff that it is given to it to endure and live on. The young child I'm speaking about. Back in the day, children started working at the age 9. They would sell newspapers, in the dirty streets of London. you know, but but the idea is that we don't have a sense of the system that maintains us until we become part of the system, and then we realize that the system has a value. This is a very good thing, that the person just sits down for a moment and asks themselves honestly what they care for. Someone once complimented me on the questions I bring up in these talks. But I can tell you, some of the questions that I bring up in these talks, they are questions that I have asked alone. And there's something when you don't fear your own unknown presence, that life can be collectively responsible, you know? That means we are like piano keys, imagine, and nature is just playing this next level tune on the piano. And if a human being doubts itself, it's like the piano player being incapable to fully pressing down the piano key. Now, this piano player is not a personification of the cosmos. I'm just saying that in life, just like you can think of the early human beings, they would see animals, that they would be aware of the animal, that they would know, like, they had seen the animal before, and they would see animals they hadn't seen before. And life is kind of like that, even though we're way more civilized, but it has a wilderness component. And so if the person realizes the unknown, they will suddenly notice the walls of their knowledge. And that's when you can only become your teacher. Nobody else can. When you reach the top of the mountain, you know, then the journey is not with feet. You need wings. And that's the Rabindranath Tagore joy to service transition. You know, many human beings work, and it's like Michelangelo says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. Your work is an internal action already done. That means, I don't know how many people consider this, but I sometimes know where the talk is going from the beginning before I give it. Guys, I'm going to show you a picture. It's from London in the 1800s. Look at these kids, guys. Look at the wallpaper. These are kids who would work in the 1800s, you know? And kids today say they're depressed. You know? Look at these kids. They were like grown men from the womb, you know? These kids understood that when they chased work, they found the joy of work, you know? That means there is fun with direction and there is fun with no direction. That means there's a type of joy and pleasure that nothing goes further. Nothing can be said to be added to the tomorrow, you know? But then there's a work where the person's like, oh my God, it's like I'm like a candle. At some point, it's all gonna just suddenly be like someone's gonna change the channel, you know? And so when it comes to that moment, the person has to put the energy of their life towards an effort, and usually that effort is physical. And to find the balance, the complete balance of what is a healthy life, of an proper inner life and outer life, for now, I'm suggesting a yin-yang civilization. I'm suggesting that we have a balance. We realize like the yin-yang symbol is actually a metaphor for the object-subject relationship. What does that mean? That means you can't be a mind without a concept of matter. You can't be matter without there to be someone to see the matter. You see? Your great work is how far you saw in this world and what you cared for. And there's two types of purpose. You know, Shakespeare, wow, I totally remember something Shakespeare said. Shakespeare has this next level quote, guys, which I feel this quote deserves to, if there was a museum of the greatest sentences ever written, this would be in it. Shakespeare said, some are born great. Some achieve greatness. And some have greatness thrust upon them. And the human being listening right now may wonder which one is which hand did I get? And I will tell you, our whole species got the last hand. What that means is greatness is being thrust upon a species. That means if you care for the sinking ship, you'll care for your civilization. If you don't care for the sinking ship, then you'll watch yourself drown. Then that means your genetical memory right now in the future is going to have a harder time. That means don't make life harder for your DNA in the future. You know? Now, of course, a huge point, a huge angle of this whole idea of work we got to see is that, of course, there's different kinds of work, you know? Rumi had this quote, he said, you must work in the invisible. Let me find the accurate quote. Let's see if Saint Google has something to say here. Oh, here we go. So Rumi says, work in the invisible world at least as hard as you do in the visible. What does that mean? That means you are giving a lot of your attention in the conscious waking state to how you are an object-based subject. Rumi is telling you now you also need to give the same effort to see how you're a subject-based object rather than an object-based subject. What that means is in the unknown we are rhythm. In the known we are particle. I was reading something in regards to Vedic thought that it was mind-boggling. It was fascinating, of course, but mind-boggling in that sense. Oh, God. That's good orange juice. You gotta care for a mind that you haven't seen 100% of. You gotta care for the potential of your own ability. You see, there's something strange. You can notice this if you're very subtle. The thing, okay, let's say everybody knows how to move as a body. Everybody knows how to move around, how to be mobile in three-dimensional space continuum. But now, how many people know how to move as a mind? Most people, their sense of mind is an absence of it. They know, they become certain the mind is there due to its absence. You know, that means emptiness is actually what cuts the veil. I've had moments where sometimes when I get tired, and not tired based on my own will. Tired because my body just can't take it anymore. But the will can be endless. Your attention is unchanging at its core. When the person realizes this, they become freedom. It's like it's not freedom is not just something to have. To the yogic mind, it was something that was fundamental to the nature of being. The sky is the freedom of the bird. The world is the freedom of man's mind. You know, many people don't realize this, but the essence of all creativity is noticing the unknown. It is so simply here, but it can so complexly happen. So in such a complex way happen. It's the potential of creaturehood. It is that we are not just actors on the stage of our own consciousness. That nature was here and we were here with it. And it's an opportunity and it's an intimidating one. That means some people were thinking about comfort zone and discomfort zone. Like I notice some people talk that way. You know, they feel they have a zone of comfort. I'm like, excuse me? When has it ever been comfortable on this planet? Do you know the comfort is a luxury? If you're comfortable, oh my God, it's like, go kiss the mirror because it's good karma. There is something in this world which is the cries of the deeper events. That there is a shadow to society also. The value, let's say you're a human being and some people speak this way where they say, fuck the system. You know? Let's say you abandon your civilization. You're like, all right, I don't like this place, you leave. There will always be, or I wouldn't say always, but after some time, perhaps the thought may arise, who would I have been? And what would my civilization have been if I was there with it? If I didn't let the civilization walk alone? In the book, The Great Work, it's a strange book, very unedited. But in this book, and the first quote for it, from an archetype of my own energetic reflection that I acknowledged as Astra, your work works with you. And what that means is after you're done with the individual heaven, you reach your individual heaven, then you will notice you are still in the collective hell. And then you will seek the collective heaven. That means imagine chaos and order were your child, both of them. Both of them were your children, imagine. You would see, you would give freedom to both, but you would also communicate to both, you know? That component that component of your work working with you is an implication of a trust of awareness more than a trust of self. So I would tell you that my inner realms were inaccessible until I trusted my awareness as itself, as it is. It's the question. It's a really grand question. Many sociologists should ask this. That do we want a dishonest utopia or an honest dystopia? If we had a choice between these two, a dishonest utopia, life was good but everybody was artificial, or an honest dystopia where everybody was real and yet the world was messed up. I think this is one of the best questions that sociology can fathom. And by the nature of that question, there will come generations of kids wondering, wait a minute, what about an honest utopia? Because you can say a dishonest dystopia, it's broken. It's a broken civilization. That means it's very common sense. If right now, imagine it's 50% people civilized, 50% humans savage. Imagine if it goes beyond, okay, if it goes to like maybe like 70% savage, 30% civil, we're a broken civilization. Anytime more than 50% of the species is being engaged in violence, then it's a broken civilization, it's a broken system. That means if people right now, they feel they're in the greatest place on earth, but then there's parts of the planet being destroyed and children crying, like in what kind of temporary heaven vacation are we on if the world is chaos? And so it's the attention of the being, because there's two components. There's the person pulling the other person out of the quicksand, and then there's the will of the person in the quicksand who's like, I want to get out of this situation. For me, it's like, imagine the internet Imagine this interface of going online and searching for stuff wasn't built, but for example, um, group phone calling was built. Do you know? That means imagine human beings didn't have access to information on the internet, but they had access to a global community of human beings. Okay? Because the internet is technically a cyberspace global reality. It's a world inside a world where anyone in the world can enter. So, guys, Franny in the chat section says, "What about an honest utopia where everyone is authentically what they want to be, with the knowledge of all, and innovative creationism?" First of all, innovative creationism, interesting. I like that. I like those two words together. That's But I'll tell you this, the challenge of an honest utopia is its progress. That means it is possible, but would it progress, like would we be as morally advanced if the disasters of history had not happened? Do you know? So it's again the question of how do we balance the chaos and order, but not just on a personal level, but on an impersonal level and its implications. Because a person may harbor chaos, like for example, Carl Jung said, every person has to confront their shadow. That means don't just go on living in this life thinking you're a good person in an artificial inner realm just only way. You got to realize that this is life, and where your attention goes suggests your morality. You know? So, Mr. Grateful says you're putting humans as a species as somewhat important to the existence of the whole when the whole world functioned just fine without us. Yes, but you know why I'm doing that? There's a very good reason. The reason, what Mr. Grateful, I would answer that why I'm putting humanity as a priority, because it's a rare opportunity. Because after billions of years, suddenly a creature can notice itself to develop technologies and languages. It's like I don't know if people just can take that in. Like we were under the water, you know? Yeah, when you look at evolutionary biology, there was a point where you could say this was one of the earliest portal-like experiences for the creature, where the creature stepped out of water and came onto land and accessed a totally new existential condition. And the question of evolution becomes even more complex if you think of a multidimensional evolution, where multiple different things evolved at different times. That means instead of one species emerging, suddenly imagine 12 species emerge at the same time, different species. You know? You know, I feel you have to trust the unknown dimension sometimes as much as the known if you want to see beyond the known. You know, you have to trust the world when you step out of the front door. You know, you got to trust outer space when you step out of the atmosphere. You know, there's always new dimensions. That's the cool thing. That means if two human beings, for example, there's this idea in marriage that the two human beings, they become bored with each other. And it makes sense if they're being artificial, if they think they have to be a certain shape all the time. You can say there is an unknown depth to every mind. There's nothing in this world that says it's going to be rational. That means, what is the rational explanation for a sphere in the middle of nowhere? The rationality is built after. That means it's like there's a massive unknown gap. Then after some point when the creature could speak about itself, it started suggesting models to the world. I feel really there has to be a component to vision, and there has to be a component of you're noticing something that is unknown, but to your presence feels known. Something like that. There is this concept I told my brother once. He asked me uh, like what motivates me. I told him I just declared endless endurance. You know, it's imagine you're imagine like you're a yogi, like who's late to somewhere. Let's say you're a kid, young kid in India, and you're late to school, to class. And the teacher's like, "Why are you late?" And the kid's like, "Who's late?" And the teacher's like, "You. Why are you late?" And the kid's like, "What do you mean you? Who's the you?" It's like, "You, kid." And the person says his name, and the kid's like, "I'm not my name. Who's late?" And after an enlightening round of endless questioning of the void, the teacher realizes that time is worn on our wrist. In York University here in Toronto, on its wall, somebody has drawn this great picture. I don't know if it's still there or not, but this picture of a bunch of people, if I remember correctly, they're dancing around the fire that is time. Bunch of people with suits dancing around the fire, which is time, something like that. Hopefully I'm remembering it correct. You see, guys, it's like we are trying to create an alphabet of states of mind. Imagine that no one state of mind can own all states of mind. Like, we should write this in law or something. Do you know? That means there is a state to the mind. There's a way you are keeping yourself as a human being, which is the projection of your meaning. You know what it feels like? It feels like, I mean, it's a very strange, the evolutionary design is very strange because our view of the self is first person. So this creature opened its eyes to a world before having a notion of itself. Only when it saw its shadow, or maybe saw its reflection, or maybe paid attention to its body and suddenly noticed that way, somehow the creature, this evolutionary creature was like, whoa, what is this? And that's when the subjective dimension of work began. So I would say you don't need to just here's the thing. Imagine we want to build a healthy civilization. So we got to say this healthy civilization needs a healthy body and a healthy mind. You know, it needs a healthy body to complete the tasks of a healthy mind. You know. Some wondered why the sage spilled the beans, because the cosmos was hungry. You know, if you consider freedom as your nature, then it's as if you are free, you just need to remember it. And I feel energy cannot be depressed. Energy can't be just defined by a certain ideological landscape or a certain emotional attachment to an ideological landscape. Because where we are ending up is that we have become familiar with the objective, we have become familiar with the subjective. Now we're noticing more. It's like the aftermath, like the way I explained it in another talk was that we're in the third phase of evolution, where we're going from the transitioning, we're evolving from a conscious self to a conscious world. So it's a cool time. Right now, I think we as human beings are really enjoying individualism. In the future, systems could be so collective. Imagine people don't have an opportunity to be individual. They're just born and they're part of a collective mind hovering in all information, not realizing that outside there was a simpler but incredibly more advanced way of living. Your work is really like, think of yourself as an archer. You look at the target, you know your strength and ability and capability, and in that domain, you pull the arrow. And you realize that regardless of what happens, this moment happens only once. There's nothing that has ever given me more power than this one idea, that every moment happens once. It's like the ultimatum to the concept of living with no regrets. And all of knowledge has been limited to the domain of observance. Think of yourself like your phone. It's not going to get the Wi-Fi signal of houses from like 3 blocks away, do you know? But it shows you like your neighborhood or environment, do you know? And it's sometimes similar in the inner realm. Sometimes I have looked at things and I was like, okay, there's no way I'm ever going to understand it. But then I looked at the same thing and I didn't have any doubt. I just didn't have an opinion on myself, and I just looked at the phenomena. I got access to how the phenomena was. Then my own inner realms could always comment, because you see, you need a foundation to your movement. So for me, that was a declaration, but it wasn't a declaration, it was a silent declaration of the soul. It wasn't a vocal public declaration of joyous intent. You know? You know, there's some things that it's as if like the world, if you can see the world will instruct you. That means, think of it this way: people listen to what other human beings said. Some human beings listened to what the whole moment said. And the whole moment was silence. And so there is, through silence, the activation of a field-like way of being. That's all I'm suggesting, and it's not, it's, you can't drown it in ideology too much. You can't. There is no conclusion. There is no purpose to its cause or effect. It is just noticing a way the world is. That evolution, Darwinian evolution, which is Darwinian, you know, has led to matter being aware of itself. Like, for me, evolution made an object into a subject to itself. Right now, somebody can come and say, "Who are you?" and you can give an answer, but then that idea of you, you can't, you'll see it's not physical. It's just a sort of how the inner realms have synced with a certain way they want to express in the outer, you know? That means I say inner realms for now to give a certain organization and a sort of uh, up, advancement, but there, when you really go within, there is no concept. That's why I created the concept of language threshold, because I'm telling you guys, if you don't have this concept of the language threshold, it's gonna be a room of people endlessly pointing at each other's egos, which is their own. I don't know if anybody's had those kind of metaphysical conversations, you know, where when it's coming to in regards to cosmological considerations or even ontological considerations, it's like it's like specifics make us see. It's, you know what it is. It's like two people seeing the same thing and both of them agreeing that they're seeing the same thing and being able to even access the same thing doesn't mean they 100% see it as the same thing. Do you know? Guys, I'm going to go into a quote tunnel for the theme work. And a quote tunnel is pretty much, I read a bunch of quotes. Okay, let's see. Literally Googling work quotes. Let's see how different human beings, their inner realms opened up to the concept of work. Albert Camus. A man's work is nothing but this slow trek to rediscover through the detours of art those two or three great and simple images in whose presence his heart first opened. All right, so slow down there, Camus. All right, he's saying a man's work is nothing but the slow trek to rediscover. Yeah, it's a journey. You can't control its speed all the time. Then he says through the detours of art, so when you trust your inspiration, those two or three great and simple images, so those three are great, simple, an artwork is a great artwork. It's not just a great artwork, it's a great moment for the artist, you know? Those two or three great and simple images in whose presence his heart first opened. That means Albert Camus is suggesting that you are enduring in this game of life, that after some point you will experience certain moments in it that it's as if like in whose presence his heart first opened. Your heart will open to a wonder of your own mind's fascination for the world, and if you trust life, when you see there's no other way, then you may have the blessing of experiencing your own karma, not your inner realm's karma per se. That means every person is different. That means when people go to I thought about the concept of enlightenment from a physical standpoint, like doctors are like enlightened gurus. You know, people go to the doctor and it's like, doctor, what's up? You know, and the doctor tells them, all right, take this and take that and you good, you know? So the doctor is the physical enlightened guru, do you know? But now the mental enlightened guru is in some sense, I thought about this idea that could it be like every person has a different body, so every person has a different response to their health, a different route for their health. And I was like, what if every living being is in on their minds are different? That means your attention is not like happening like another human being, because if it was, you'd be a clone. Like that'd be freaky. You know what I mean? This is why I think nobody ever appreciates people 100% just agreeing all the time. You know, there has to be a sort of natural component. The best way to keep things clear and pure, especially when you want to pilot your attention, is to look at nature. You see, when you impose, then there is aftermath conscience consequence. But when you watch, when you let life move first and you see how the environment is moving and then you move, you become an intelligent part of the environment because you're aware of the intelligence of the environment. And Albert Camus pretty much in this quote is trying to say that when you wonder about this life, you will find certain moments that will revolutionize your view, your eyes. That means that revolutions aren't just in history books, they're also in the eyes that wrote those history books, you know. Vince Lombardi, to continue with the quote tunnel. Vince Lombardi, people who work together will win, whether it be against complex football defenses or the problems of modern society. Yeah, because I mean, the more you have, the more sophisticated the vision can be. This is why scientists want to they want everybody to know science. Why? Because then scientists all around the world can wonder about the nature of this reality. But this issue with science is that science has, you know what it is? Friedrich Nietzsche has this quote, which I think is atheists, it has happened to atheism. And the quote Friedrich Nietzsche has, he says, somebody has to be careful that when they fight a monster, they don't become a monster in the process. He who stares into the abyss stares back into them. This is Friedrich Nietzsche, this German philosopher, saying this. If we take the justice approach of the militant atheist, you know, we would see that the atheists were like, no way we're going to let our nations be governed by 6th century ideology, do you know? And so yet the monster they felt they fought was a reflection of their nature. This is why he who fights a monster can't lead. Because chaos has been exposed. You know, anything that wherever your attention goes, you immediately extract sensory definition from, or other types of definition from. What appears to me as imagination feels like the sensory information, like a signal is being received, but as it's being received, it is being filtered into language and then arriving to the conscious mind. So you can say it's like, or imagine like lines, like when you look at an atom and the lines of the electron inside the atom. So you would see it's as if there's a line around you, which is language. There's a line above that, which is image. There's a line above that, which is dynamic experience. And then there's a line above that, which is unknown. And the signal of meaning and reality is arising from that unknown. So these are the layers. These are the Russian dolls to consciousness. So for me, that's the thing. I was like, okay, some people, they want to go into, they want the personality to hold the truth. I'm like, okay, good luck. Good luck trying to get an idea to be everything. Doesn't work. The idea just defines you. You got to let go of your humanity if you want the ideology to be alive. You see, ideology, we have to think of it this way, they take energy. That means like any idea that has passed so far, that idea, this is kind of savage, but like an alien has jumped from different people's minds to continue on to the next thing. It's as if like, you know, what do we say? We say there's a genetical continuity in regards to DNA, and there's also the skeleton, the DNA of the idea. You know, iDNA. The iDNA. The DNA of the, like, you know, the idea's core structure. You know, because, you know, like you would say, if there's a surgeon, an architect, and uh, um, a painter on a canvas, okay? And these three people were in the room, and there was someone who the doctor had to do a surgery on, the surgeon had to do a surgery on, but the surgeon couldn't. The next best person would be the architect. That means who would have the same precision of hand? The architect. And after the architect, the painter. You know, there's a question that is more fascinating than what is the meaning of life? And that if we had the meaning of life, what, or I would say, not just what is the meaning of life, why the meaning even needs to be there. That means it's kind of like looking at space and being like, why am I so concentrated on the form? Like, we know that there's more space than matter. And if we really look at ourselves, I mean, we're not considering that we are creatures of space. You know, in even traditional spirituality didn't see that far. You know, traditional spirituality, it jumped, but nobody spoke about the soul would step out of its body of space. That means, imagine, like, we have an out-of-body experience and we have an out-of-space experience. It's like an out of a material position experience and out of the awareness. On some level, it's just the presence of energy. On another level, it's the stories of humanity's glory. Ronald Reagan, the taxpayer, that's someone who works for the federal government but doesn't have to take the civil service exam. Okay. Yeah. I don't know who's setting up this quote list online, but anyways. Mother Teresa, there's always the danger that we may just do the work for the sake of the work. This is where the respect and the love and the devotion come in, that we do it to God, to Christ, and that's why we try to do it as beautifully as possible. Now, you know, of course, Mother Teresa, she was at an age where you would, of course, kindly just nod and smile at her, you know. But, you would say that an argument could be made that work is God moving. So any movement is a collective movement, in other words, something like that. Plato says the beginning is the most important part of the work. Yeah, because that's where it begins. Yeah. That's like when, I mean, honestly, it feels that way. When I, for example, I draw geometrical, like, artwork sometimes. And when I draw like one successful part of the picture, then I'm in the rhythm. That means once I just get a sense of the rhythm, I'm in it, you know? I can ride the waves, you know? Martin Luther King Jr., whatever your life's work is, do it well. A man should do his job so well that the living, the dead, and the unborn could do it no better. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. This is a Martin Luther King quote I've never heard before. Whatever your life's work is, do it well. A man should do his job so well that the living, the dead, and the unborn could do it no better. Wow. That means aim for the highest. Try to do something in a way where you're like, if the whole species was watching you, how would you feel about what you're doing? Because when we realize, first of all, how complex the mind is, but at the same time, how fragile the biological situation is, but like, here's the thing. We have a savage civilization with low intelligence, or we have a civilized civilization with incredibly high intelligence. And that's the thing. That's how the future generations, all the kids born, you know, after 2020 have to make a decision. They have to look at this and be like, okay, do I accept this world or not? Because if you don't accept this world, your mind is a genius. Your mind is like, in back in the day, what they would say, it's a trickster. It can endlessly escape what it doesn't want to see. This quote is so incredible, guys. I'm gonna share this quote. Okay, so James Francis says, what makes you think you're here only once? The soul's. I said, you're physically here. You're physically here only once. Unless we have unless you have, James, some secret immortal technology, you know, you know. I mean, technically, immortal technology, that's like only living once. But I would say I meant it in the sense that, yeah, you don't have the same physical body as 10 years ago. You know, you think you're physically eternal. I mean, the atoms don't die, but but the idea of what was once man or Rome. Uh, sorry, guys, I just went suddenly to like remembrance of a gladiator movie scene. It's an instrument. That's the healthiest way to see intelligence. It's an instrument that is being used by the free will, and the free will can administer. You can choose. Like, I feel our brains are so advanced because they emerged out of a collective environment. That means if you want to know what the first waves of information that hit this creature was, it was the jungle. From like biological evolution was crafted in the furnaces of savage animal, like bewildered beasthood. But after we got through that and we became conscious enough to leave the jungle and build a world, to build a civilization, that's when really things began. And now you are alive in that civilization. But what is the task? It's a strange time. You know, I mean, when you walk outside, like I'm looking at the city and I'm like, why is it all just, rectangular, and like, what is this all straight lines? I'm like, where's the geometry of the city? The Medici family would make they were like these rich bankers. I mean, even though their motives were questionable, like they were smart because they looked at society and they said that if civilization was beautiful, the person would feel beautiful. If the civilization was incredible, the person born in the civilization would feel incredible. They wouldn't have time to try to fathom all the ways they can't, you know? That means if we apply Occam's razor on a linguistic level, like the word can is much simpler. That means there was a time I'm like, so what? If like something like doesn't happen like the way the inner realm expects, it's like the world has freedom. Like, this is the biggest discrimination or distinction of someone who knows their inner realms or not. Have you freed the world from yourself, or are you just trying to free yourself from the world? That means, have you allowed yourself to look at a tree and wonder, what was this before we gave it the name tree? Where does that state of mind take you? To the void where it all began. We must work towards an advanced civilization, and we must create systems that are joyous in the process. And joy is like honor, at least for you can say the karmic entity. For a creature in a cause and effect mode, uh, that is the opening. I feel it's like a rare lens. It's like physical existence. It's like out of eons, like uh, you know, from the heart of a dying star suddenly came an unknown person looking through a known camera. That's creaturehood. It is like, I sometimes when I'm looking through my eyes, I'm like, who said action? You know, it's like, when we wake up, it's like we're in the film. But meditation was to closing your eyes and wondering what's directing the nature of the moment. And I think work is a crucial element, and it has to come from trust in the better. I don't know what other algorithm there is to life. It's like they ask the person, how is it possible, man? How are you so happy all the time? It's like the person's like, what is there to get sad about? Everything there, it becomes nothing. How can I get sad about nothing? Martin Luther King has another quote. He says, all labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance and should be undertaken with painstaking excellence. Honestly, for me, Martin Luther King's inner realms, he had such a compassion for the world. You can see it. He cared for the civilization's outcome, not just what happened there. I don't know how many people know this, but when Martin Luther King, he spoke about, he says he has a dream, you know? There's a grand speech about it. You can see the clip. And he says, I have a dream where my children are in a world where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but by the nature of their character, or something like that. By the conduct of their character or something. And he was such an advanced being. He was saying, what are we doing looking at color? When the inner realms, when the eyes of the mind of the person has an ability to fathom outer space, that means sometimes in life you have to not take the moment seriously, because serious moments are moments that solidify the meaning. And every person has their own pace. I'm not joking. Like, every person is like an instrument that they have to find the way to play it. Become an explorer of how your mind is being, and what greater wisdom is there. Socrates says the only true wisdom is to know that you know nothing. But let's say you have that wisdom. You need wisdom for a decision. There isn't people just randomly thinking, okay, I'm wisdom, yay. Wisdom is based on how you observe something, and how much you're aware that there is an emptiness to phenomena. Language has to evolve, and how else can it evolve unless human beings share the inner workings of their eyes? Because, I mean, honestly, think about the internet. Like, why is it here? Like, what opportunity does it give us, to share who we are, to attempt to build the prototype of an honest civilization? An honest civilization doesn't mean a civilization that believes everything, but it means it's a civilization that honestly looks at something, then decides to be whatever. But they have that moment where they see the efficient value. So think of it this way. If you're someone who you have a problem in your life, you'll be like, okay, so I could check down one thing from the checklist, that I know what the problem is. If you have a problem, at least that's good. One advantage of having a problem, you know at least what the problem is. Okay. The second thing is, okay, is that the idea of the problem is that there needs to be a solution. So you know there's a problem with a solution, and the most important thing is to see what is the way to find the solution to the problem based on how the design of the problem is. So I pretty much look at any problem, I wonder about its reverse, I wonder about its symmetrical opposite, I wonder about it through the void, and I wonder about how would this idea become unfathomable to me. And when I look at it through those different angles, instantly I realize I have, through the dimensions of my observation, noticed that the dimensions are my observation. And so the attention, that's why I'm constantly saying your attention is the most important thing in this life. Your attention is your most important resource. It's your greatest ally. Your this observer, this sight that you're being right now in the moment, this is your greatest ally. Your own eyes. There's a joy. There's a joy because life is like multi-level, multi-dimensional in the sense that, like, you can never just be the same, and you can never really be different. It's weird. It's as if the person blows the birthday candles, years are passing by, and they're like, oh, it's my birthday. They say it's my birthday, but every year passing, their biological, their psychological, their physical, they are becoming a different being. So we can say DNA is like a film, you know? It's like a film it's like a CD put in like an old school DVD, you know? And the DVD it's put in is civilization and the world. So the self, like a DVD, is put into the world. And so then you see the film of life. Thomas Edison. Opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. Theodore Roosevelt, far and away the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing. Yeah, it's like go all in on a hand that makes sense. Vincent van Gogh, I put my heart and my soul into my work and have lost my mind in the process. Oh my God. How did Vincent van Gogh first find his mind? That's my question. How could he find the mind? It's not like an object. It's unless he means it in a I mean, of course he was a eccentric figure. There has to be more quotes than this, guys. Hold on. Benjamin Franklin. It is the working man who is the happy man. It is the idle man who is the miserable man. Yeah, you gotta have some direction. Maya Angelou, nothing will work unless you do. Oh my God. This is, I think this is as close as a sentence can get to being about almost style wise perfect. Vince Lombardi says the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary. Wow. Badass. Badass. I could totally see him saying this like with the same intensity as a freestyle rapper in a rap battle, you know. How does the moment breathe? And where will our eyes go? Khalil Gibran says, work is love made visible. And if you cannot work with love but only with distaste, it is better that you should leave your work and sit at the gate of the temple and take your alms of those who work with joy. That means there was an issue. There was something that the monk back in the day didn't understand. The divinity of the working man. The divinity of the effort to continue, which is forever honest because we, deep down in our nature, are very simple. That means if you challenge people's complexity, you will suddenly notice that after some point it either had an emotional reason or there was a sort of conceptual, like you can, how can I say it? Communication is always good in a world where for eons it has just been silence. The voice of man is the roar of the universal sector. And you know, right now people are defining with narratives that are either new age, religious, secular, different moments in history, different mythologies, or whatever. But there will come a time where we will only identify as cosmic knowers, knowers of the cosmos. That is simply it. That is the true walk of our species. You know, the Bhagavad Gita speaks about it as the field of activity of the knower. And I remember when I saw that idea, I was like, bingo! You know, it was like in my inner, like I noticed that there was something there. That we must prepare for the world as our new self. We must not fear collective movements, just like birds in nature don't fear flying together. You know, you see all the other species in nature, they're in a natural environment and they all go in sequence. They like wolves run together, you know, buffalo run together. Also, fish swim together, they go to school together, schools of fish, you know. I think intelligence is an inner attempt of the self to not go extinct. That we have to engage, or we feel we are not real, maybe subconsciously. There's something about, I remember terming the concept expression, a certain expression threshold in the human being. They reach a certain point, like they need to express a certain amount throughout the day. Do you know? For me, a lot of the things that, of course, as the person I am, like a lot of emotional releases I do through writing. That means like sometimes in the most intense moments, I go and grab a pen and I write a letter to the universe, as if like someone complaining to the origin of energy. It's like I want to speak to the manager who's in charge of this world. And they're like, call this number. I'm like, you serious? It's like that's what the books say. But what I'm trying to say is, regardless of the narrative, the search for truth is an experiential phenomena that surpasses any sort of conclusion of ideology. So we must not forget that the idea of man-made, who made the idea of man? Before we called ourselves human, who made the idea of the human? And that is the grand mystery, the glitch in the linguistic simulation. The self before the condition of being. Walt Disney says, I have been up against tough competition all my life. I wouldn't know how to get along without it. Wow. Stephen Hawking, work gives you meaning and purpose, and life is empty without it. Henry Ford says, there is joy in work. There is no happiness except in the realization that we have accomplished something. Exactly. The feeling that something incredible is about to happen is the best way to transition this world out of this world. No? That means, imagine, instead of people suffering and transitioning out of this physical landscape, there was a celebration. There was an ultimate celebration. Imagine the most incredible event in human history was going to happen, but guess what? Every day the most incredible event in human history was happening, and so it didn't matter when you closed your eyes, when you saw that your species could never. There's a joy in that. There's some feeling in me that regardless of what happens to who I am, that the world went places, not just people in the world. We have to be lions when it comes to advancement of any kind. What does that mean? That means when you see the important and you're honest, you roar. Thomas Edison says there's no substitute for hard work. But there is inspiration, which is a factor, I would say. Omar Khayyam says, the moving finger writes, and having writ moves on, nor all your piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out a word of it. Rumi says, my heart is so small, it's almost invisible. How can you place such big sorrows in it? Look, he answered, your eyes are even smaller, yet they behold the world. Wow. We are small, but we still see the big. Rumi says, when you do things from your soul, you feel a river of joy within you. Rumi has this quote where he says, never lose hope, my heart. Miracles dwell in the invisible. That means the potential. Like literally, energy, in thermodynamics, we can say transforms from one form to another. But it's still energy. It can't be created or destroyed. And there's honestly like this endless change component being constantly observed, at least in the conscious waking state. I mean, of course, life is working already. It's just that we have an opportunity to direct it. That means if you do nothing on this planet, like, yeah, the world's still gonna happen. But it's like you could have done something too. It would be that kind of. Anyways, guys, I guess I'm gonna bring the talk to an end. Thanks for listening, whoever's tuned in. I'm gonna open it up to Q&A. So thanks for listening, whoever's listened so far. It's Q&A, so the talk has ended at this point. And one last thing to say about the subtitle. Man's work in nature, the inseparability of the vision of the world with the vision of the human being in it. Like cyberspace is an effort of making the world more abide by our inner realms, and nature's effort is for us to abide with it. And so it's very fascinating event. Life, where it all happened, and also where it all went towards the unknown, where it all returned to the unknown. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. It's just the Q&A, so you can ask your question in the chat section, and I'll engage that for, let's say, 5 minutes. Usually people don't have questions, so if the people have questions, we can have it more. But anyways, thanks for listening, guys.